Hey Internet, I wanted to make a video going over, I guess, the nuts and bolts of a piece of mine I wrote called Nails Made of Glass. It's very orchestral, very lush, romantic, some thick harmonies and textures, and I just always wish that when I was in school that there was, or that there were videos I could find of composers going through really the composition process, talking about harmonies and kind of their thought process behind doing different things. I thought it would have been really valuable. So I thought I'd go ahead and do that for anyone who's an aspiring composer or looking for different techniques and thought processes to apply to their own compositions. On top of that, I'll talk about some of the mixing and mastering that I did for this, and yeah. So I'm gonna just play the first part of this piece. As you see, I got some grouped tracks. The beginning section is very lush. The second section is some big orchestral percussion, and it's very action oriented, but I just want to focus on this beginning section here. So to begin with, let's just press play and hear what we're working with. Great, so I'm just going to focus on that beginning part, and let's dive into with kind of how the whole composition process started. I had recently purchased the Adagio string bundle from 8dio. If you're not familiar with 8dio or their products, check them out, the number 8dio.com. They're awesome. But when I got it, I always spend a lot of time just going through any new library I get, trying out anything and everything, just so I'm aware of all the things it can do and try to teach myself how to learn it. And this patch, or series of patches, what they call the ensemble dynamic bowing, I just fell in love with. I just love the articulation here. I mean, that's just me throwing down any chord that you play with this patch is just beautiful. And I just love how it just swells in and comes out. I've also got it mixed here to where I'm hearing far more of the farm microphone, so I'm hearing more of the recorded room as opposed to the up-close instruments themselves. But I just found this patch, these series of patches, and said I gotta make something with this. It's beautiful. So it's just block chords and this kind of dynamic cello track right here is really the foundation for everything that builds off of it. So we start with an E flat major chord in second inversion, so we've got B flat in the bottom and E flat and G above. You can see right there. We then move to a G minor chord, again in second inversion. Follow that by F major in second inversion again. So up to this point, we're just moving second inversion chords around the whole time. And then we finally get to D minor, which is the first chord that's actually in root position. And just because I wanted it to have a darker tone there, because it's kind of turning the corner per se in terms of the phrase, I added a low D at the bottom, just to give it that darker note. Right there. Then we essentially go through the same progression a second time, but it's slightly altered. So instead of just having E flat minor, we add a C at the bottom, so it actually turns into a C minor 7 chord, just to begin that progression again. We then go and we go to a G minor chord. Again, that's in second inversion as well, but I add another voice on top just to add forward motion and give this sense of growing and direction. We then follow it by F major in second inversion, again with another voice on top compared to the first time that we voiced it. And then the last chord that we do is actually an E flat minor 7 chord. So we add, E flat major 7 chord. So we add the major 7 on top, but then I have it in third inversion. So the 7th is both on top as well as in the bass. It gives it almost like a neutral sort of, I guess, tonality or harmony to it. And I'm just, like, I personally love very thick, complicated textures. Adagio for strings is one of my favorite pieces of music, and that the thickness of those harmonies is just incredible, and it's beautiful. And this last chord is definitely that. So let's see, we got B flat. Sorry, my mistake. We've actually got it in second inversion. So the B flat is on the bottom there, and then we've only got the major 7, which would be D, on top. Gives that very thick, neutral, very airy sort of sensation to it. Then as we continue, we actually repeat it a second time, and I'm adding different voices to it, as you can see here. And then this third time, I slightly alter it. So we have E flat, G minor, but then this third chord, instead of it being F major, I actually slightly alter it to make it A diminished. So if we listen to it on its own, G minor again, now A diminished. And then we go to, sorry, what is this? Let's see, is it just D major? D, F sharp, A? Yeah, then we go to D major. So again, it's just taking this stated set of harmonies and then just building off of them. And at the same time that I'm building off of them, I'm also slightly editing what we originally started with, so the listener isn't completely cognizant of all that's happening, because there's so many melodies and things going on that are really grabbing your attention, but subconsciously the foundation is changing, and that really helps keep interest going the whole time. So let's talk about kind of how I'm creating this progression. So we've got this section right here where I've stated this set of chords, and I'm stating them again. This clip right here is exactly the same as this one, but I had a melody on top coming from the oboe. I know it says bassoon. I originally tried bassoon. It was very dark and muddy, and it didn't stand out much compared to all of the string activity that I have going on. So I switched it to oboe, and I liked it a lot better. Cut through the mix a lot. But so I have this oboe solo going over top of this, and at the same time I just have these accents in the cellos and violas. At first they are doubling each other, and then they split off, and they do dyads in thirds, just up and down the diatonic scale, just to give ornamentation to it and activity the whole time. Again, it doesn't grab your attention, but again, the foundation of this track that the listener isn't really the focal point of it is changing the whole time. So again, forward motion, nothing's ever the same, nothing's ever completely repeated exactly the same. So again, doubling, and here they split. This continues, and then I do the same thing, but I just bring the violas up an octave. So again, they're doubling, but they're an octave apart. They'll bring it up, and then they'll split again once we get here. So that's the activity that's going on with the strings. While all of this is going on, the woodwinds are definitely grabbing the attention of the listener. I have melodies tossing back and forth essentially between the oboe and the flute. And I wish that I could say that there was more of a process behind this. Definitely when I was writing the block chords for the cello and deciding what to do with kind of ornamental aspects of the rest of the string section, those were very conscious decisions and thoughts that I had. But the way that I write melody is just all through intuition and just throwing my hands on the keyboard until something starts to grab my attention. I mean, other than just knowing my scales and what the options are, there's not really a whole lot more to my process than that. So this was made from essentially looping this section and trying to just improvise over it until I found something that I liked. One thing though is that lots of times for the oboe, they'll pass the attention back and forth where the oboe or the melody is doing something interesting, and when it's breathing or taking a break or has a long sustained note, that's when the strings come in with their ornamentation for the foundational chords that are really holding all of this together. And again, just to add a layer of complexity, I just have the brass down here while all this is going on, just holding out some notes to just make it thicker. Bass. Whoops. Wrong thing. Yeah. But even though I can't tell you that there's more to my process than just messing around on the keyboard in order to create melody, I do want to at least show you these patches and just my selections on them. So again, this is another 8DO patch. This is their Claire flute. As you can see, using the mod wheel is very important to make it sound lyrical and to give it that human element, but it's a beautiful patch, and that combined with the oboe here, just show you this a little bit. You've got to play for the patches and the samples that you have. So, I mean, I can trigger different patches here using, you know, some very low MIDI notes if I really wanted to change articulations. But for at least this beginning part of the piece, I just want to have it very low, lyrical, very rich, very beautiful. So I kept it on this patch because I really, really loved its tone. Yeah. So yeah, we've talked about the solos. Oh, let's get into some of the mixing. So when mixing an orchestral piece, just a good rule of thumb is to try and emulate actually seeing an orchestra live in a concert hall, and to try and replicate that in your mix as much as possible, with some slight alterations. So the cellos here, again, they're kind of the bedrock for this whole thing, at least that's the way I view them. So I have them panned slightly to the right, just because the cello section would be towards the right if you were looking at the orchestra, but I also didn't want it too far over to the right because it starts the entire piece by itself, and for it to be so far to the right, it would feel lopsided and awkward. That being said, when I have these other elements come in, excuse me, like this cello, this Divisi cello that comes in, that is panned much more severely to the right. The violas are by themselves in terms of a higher register. For this section, as you see, I don't have a violin patch anywhere, so I have it panned very far to the left, just so it has its own space. And then the flute and oboe, again, try to emulate where their position would be on an actual orchestral stage. Because of the ability of the oboe to cut through a mix, I have it panned slightly more to the right, so in the stereo field, it's closer to a lot more activity in the strings with the cellos, and the flute is a little more distant from those in the stereo field just because it doesn't have the ability to cut through a mix just as well. As you see, I don't even have an EQ on this. The oboe, I bumped it up a little in the 1K range, and I wonder what I did. Okay, so here we see the dynamic cellos, while the oboe, so the dynamic cellos are being ducked very close to the area that I'm giving a boost to the oboe, so that allows the oboe to cut through. Wow, I'm actually surprised that but I'm also reducing the high end. So not only is this cello patch panned very far to the right, but it's also reducing the high end a lot so that both the oboe and flute can really come through in that area of the frequency spectrum. And again, it's panned very far right while the oboe's pretty close to center, relatively speaking. So they're not conflicting with each other too much. Then with the viola, again, it's panned a little more to the left. It could interfere with the flute and the oboe, but I have a little cut here, a little above 1K. And then on the higher end, letting it breathe a little more. And remember, again, this is a viola, so we don't have an E string. The highest string we're using is an A string. So I wasn't really worried about having some piercing high frequency content really ruining the mix or overpowering anything else. So there we go. That's essentially the compositional process, the different patches I used, as well as kind of the series of mixing techniques or reasoning behind them. I do want to say that for mastering, I used isotope ozone 6. I'm not an expert mastering engineer at all. That's why I love isotope, because a lot of its presets, I mean, they do exactly what they're titled. So I wanted to make this sound like you were in a huge concert hall and enhancing the stereo image. It does that. It just makes it sound bigger. They've got a ton of different presets, and they all accomplish very different things, and they're wonderful. It's a great asset. So if you don't know anything about mastering per se, look into isotope ozone 6, and just look into isotope on general, especially if you're a sound designer. They have tons of different VSTs and whatnot that'll really help you clean up some recordings. So yeah, that was my process for composing this and mixing it. I hope you guys learned something, and if there's anything that you think would have been cool or I should have done, or any question that you have, leave it in the comments, and I hope this was helpful. See you in the next video.